Hello there. My name is Morgan Joseph Hamilton, and I'm a PhD candidate at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, the United States. I'm going to be talking to you today about certain professionals in an uncertain field. This presentation is based on my dissertation, which I have just recently wrapped up and am excited to defend next month. So this presentation is going to cover the following sections. I'm going to give you a dissertation summary, which is just a study overview and results. And this is a brief section because what I really want to get into here is how I found my theoretical framework and conceptual model for this dissertation. I'm going to go over the theories in play and describe and explain to you the use of the conceptual model, because I think this is something that could be used to look at professions that are not traditionally described yet. So the dissertation summary here, basically, I had my research questions, and those came from this contradiction that I saw in the literature. During the pandemic, when, everything closed around the world, museums had to still maintain their audience and reach them whenever they closed their doors. So what I found was that AMEs are the closest interface a museum has to its community. Art museum educators led the quick pivot to social media and digital experiences during lockdown. And yet, art museum educators are the lowest paid, most likely to have digital learning skills, and the most vulnerable employee at museums. So this contradiction warranted further study. So I had one main research question. How do art museum educators view their roles in digital programming before, during, and after museum closures caused by the COVID-19 pandemic? And this led to several sub-questions. And these questions help me see the educator as a professional in what has been described as an uncertain profession. So a brief overview of the results. What I found after talking to 8 art museum educators across the United States in similarly sized and resourced museums, there's no clear path for someone to become an art museum educator. There are only 2 programs in the nation that are dedicated to teaching museum education as a profession. So a lot of the art museum educators I met came from different fields, such as the fine arts, art administration, or even something not even related to the arts. There's no standard structure of support for museum educators in the institution. This came about, from the perspective of the art museum educators I was talking to, where they had really close bonds with their department, and those departments are usually small. But across the institution, there's very little standard structure of support to help the educators, which might lead to why they were first furloughed, fired, and laid off during the pandemic closures. And the future support of digital virtual experiences in the museum is not certain. I also found that even now, when so many places are back open, digital and virtual experiences are not what they were during the pandemic. So how do we look at a non-traditional professionals? I couldn't study AMEs using traditional concepts of professional closure. So I formed a conceptual framework using feminist systems thinking, participatory culture, and sociology of expertise to understand these professionals through a non-traditional lens. So I had to first find a theory from all of the theories out there. I call this following the breadcrumbs. And what I ended up doing was I just had to start in the middle and go backwards before I could go forwards. So I started with sociology of professions, which my committee chair put me onto. But I found that I wasn't really understanding what that was based off of until I got to traditional professionalism. And then from there, I realized it didn't capture my subset of participants at all, which led me to the feminist sociology of professions. And after reading some of that, I realized there's a phenomenon called deprofessionalization, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then ultimately, I found the feminist sociology of expertise by Brady. Um, so, what progress is made can be unmade. With professionalism, exclusion decided by profession, profession decided by white men and patriarchy apologists. A professional occupation is a field of study and practice that excludes non-initiated or credentialed practitioners. Professionalism is the project of drawing a line of exclusion that protects the center of power, white men, and rejects anyone who doesn't fit their standard. The phenomenon of deprofessionalization is when professionalism is dominated by non-male workers. It is considered a gendered occupation. Gendered occupations have a higher chance of deprofessionalizing. This was a study done by Andrew and Wernes, where they looked at nurses and how nursing is being deprofessionalized in their country. And that process comes from just destabilizing forces on a profession and making it to where it's hard to draw that boundary of who is credentialed and who isn't. So in this section, I'm going to go over the theories that are in play. I had to look at professionalism through the feminist prism. And this started with a philosophical understanding of what professionalism is and isn't. So philosophy, professionalism, and deprofessionalization both stem from the traditional concept of professional closure. If gendered occupations are deprofessionalizing, the problem must be with the structure of professional closure, not its practitioners. Rather than drawing boundaries around who is and isn't in the club, we should look at what knowledge and expertise workers have. So with the sociology of expertise, which was popularized by Isle and Pock, focuses on a relationship between experts and clients as a transaction of information and services. The three aspects are generosity, co-production, and exclusion. Let's take the example of a lawyer. A lawyer and a client. The lawyer is being generous with his expertise and helping his client. In co-production, the lawyer uses his expertise to help the client with whatever issue the client is having, and they co-produce a solution. An exclusion is based on the lawyer needing to be set aside professionally from amateurs or non-credentialed law practicing individuals. The Feminist Sociology of Expertise by Brady took those three and expanded on them to include non-traditional professionals. So instead of generosity, we have translational exchange. Instead of co-production, we have coordination. And instead of exclusion, we have antagonism. So here I put them together so that we can compare them. So there's the relationship between the expert and the client. And the difference here on the right column, FSE sees expert and client as equally important perspectives that merely needs translation. So in that relationship, we have an output. And on the difference between the two, FSE centers the client in the synthesis of information and understanding, giving her agency in decision-making. And after we have that output, we have sites of confrontation between the two. And the difference being FSE breaks the hierarchy of expert, non-expert, and client, redefining what deprofessionalization means. So let's take the example now of an art museum educator instead of a lawyer. So translational exchange in this situation and context, The AME meets visitors where they are, trusting their experiences and knowledge as the source of learning. This is translational exchange. The art museum educator uses expertise in visitors' experiences to coordinate sites of learning that center the visitor's knowledge and expertise. And the AME serves the practice by including new and experimental methods while limiting non-education focused initiatives that do not serve the visitor. And so to clarify some of this, I'm going to go over the conceptual model that I developed for my dissertation. Before, we have to talk about some of the other theories that I explored. Henry Jenkins introduced participatory culture in his writing in 2009, and he is a highly online individual. So he saw in the media landscape early on in the 21st century, there are certain ways that people participate online that they don't necessarily do in person. And this kind of clicked with me because the art museum educators I'm looking at are also highly online. They have networks online. They also find their resources and inspiration for programming online. And there's a high amount of um, cooperation uh, rather than competition in their field. I also looked at feminist systems theories because I was looking at the system of museums, and at every level, there are ways that we can incorporate these 5 tenets to make sure that we have the most gender sensitive approach possible. And here you'll see my 3 that I've just introduced: feminist systems theory, participatory culture, and feminist sociology of expertise as overlapping Venn diagram. And it distills down to the center of feminist participatory culture of expertise. And that is the thing that guided me at every decision along the way for my dissertation. So some of the overlaps between the 3 theories that I've proposed. In feminist participatory culture, principles align regarding sensitivity to experience of research and participant, establishes a feminist character of online engagement and participation in otherwise unregulated site of inquiry. With feminist boundaries of expertise, finding boundaries in feminist sociology of expertise, essential to researcher to participant relational exchange, makes space for inclusion and criticism of professional conduct and ethics. And with participatory cultures of expertise, we have these alignments through affiliations, which are membership networks, expressions, which are practice and scholarship, collaborative problem solving, which points to antagonism and coordination, and circulation, which is conferences, publishing, and online engagement. The feminist participatory culture of expertise looks at boundary drawing and redrawing using the focusing Venn diagram. It must have a gender-sensitive, ethical, inclusive, educational, and proactive approach to understanding the data that I generated during the study. So at every point, this is the goal that I was trying to reach. And we have to think about the expert in the context of the field if we're going to reject traditional professionalism. So instead of a profession, we have a professional community, which is an encompassing boundary that includes and excludes certain fields of expertise. So within that, we have the field of expertise, the broad range of experts in a professional context. And then at the center of that is the expert. The expert is an individual with certain knowledge of understanding of the context. And in this example, the art museum educator is as much an expert as the visitor in the museum. What we have now is a flexible model that can be applied to other experts that do not have a traditional path to professionalism. Why should we try to fit non-traditional experts into a traditional professional context? We should change our understanding of professionalism to include and serve these experts, which means we need to redefine care and knowledge-based work as expertise and that can move us away from gendered occupations. I want to thank you so much, and I look forward to comments and questions, as well as seeing your presentations at Inclusive Museums 2024.